Hi everyone, this is Mariah Russell. I am your ranger lead for Sumwhence, Elsewhence, and Colorado Burnal Equinox. And today I'm going to talk to you about radio protocols. And specifically the protocols that I'm going to talk to you about today are for these three events. However, these are relatively standard protocols within our community and within the world of using radios. So if you're watching this video and you're not specifically attending one of these three events, then check in with your team lead, your department lead, and just make sure that this is exactly how they want you to operate. So at these three events, they're small, and so we run on one primary channel. We may have secondary channels if you need to have a private conversation, or we may have a sleep channel for leads who want to be on call but don't want to be monitoring radio traffic. Otherwise, all departments are on one channel. And because of this, we need to be very good about being professional with our radio usage and using it only when it's important to use a radio and not using it for chatter or just because I want to talk to my friend that's over there that also happens to have a radio. So we really want to be mindful about using the radios for radio's intended purposes. So the first thing to remember about a radio is the basic order of how we use a radio is think, listen, push, pause, talk. So think about what you're going to say. Then listen to the radio. See if the channel is clear. Push the button. Talk. That's it. And so I'm going to go through each of these in detail. So when you think about it, you want it to be actionable, brief, and a clear action. Sorry, what is the action? So what do I need? I need rebar at the gate. I need medical at center camp. So what do you need? What is your action? Try not to tell a story. If you don't know what you need, you can tell a story like, the tent just blew down and I need help. That's still pretty actionable. But you want to be really clear and succinct when you're calling for a radio call. And use plain English. We don't use 10 codes. Occasionally people will say things like 10-4, what's your 20? But use plain English. Everybody knows plain English. Most people don't yet know 10 codes. And then the other thing is if you're following up on a call, give context. Don't make a radio call saying, she's here. Who's where? Oh, medical showed up at center camp. The rebar has arrived at gate. Whatever it is, but don't expect the person that you're calling to remember what you've already said because they're doing a bunch of other things. And the other big thing is acknowledge everything. So you call in, and I'll talk about how to make an actual radio call here in a minute, but you call in and acknowledge what's been said. I heard that you need rebar at gate. Sending rebar to gate. And then acknowledge when it gets there. Rebar has arrived at gate. So I guess before I keep getting into how to, all the fine lines of what we do in a radio call is how do we do a radio call? So the first thing you want to say is who you're calling and then who you are. You say who they are twice. One, you may get caught up in the radio signal, and two, they may be doing other things and it might take that second time of hearing their name to really catch on to who you're calling. So for instance, I'm making a radio call, I'm calling to Uncle Dave. So I would say, Uncle Dave, Freya. So I would say his name or handle twice, and then mine. If I'm calling for a specific department, I could say, Gate Rangers. If I'm calling for a specific person in a different department, and I want to be known as me versus the general department, I may go DPW, Ranger Freya. So any of those would work. And then I wait. And I wait for the other person to say, go for Gate, go for Uncle Dave. So when you receive that call, you acknowledge that you got the call by saying, go for. They may include your handle or not, that's not necessarily important. And then you go ahead and say what it is that you need. The only exception to this would be the handle of all calm. All calm means you're talking to everybody. So all calm, Freya. I would pause just to make sure everybody has a chance to hear me. I don't need everybody to respond back to my all calm call. They just know, anybody who has a radio, I'm speaking to you right now. So all calm, Freya. Does anybody have eyes on the sound lead? I may put a name, does anybody have a name, eyes on Jay, the sound lead, something like that. That would be appropriate. And that's the way we can address everybody. Typically it's a 1-to-1, but sometimes we heard this at Sumwhence a lot, all calm. Is everybody okay on radio batteries? Came from our radio lead, right? So we can make those types of general announcements as well. One of the other things to remember about radios is that radios are a one-way communication. That means if I'm talking, you can't talk over me. I'm the only one that has the channel. And so if I'm going to be monologuing for a long time, I'm going to want to say break and take a pause to see if anybody has something really important that needs to happen during that time. Because what if I'm dialoguing, say again, we have the tent that blew down situation, and I'm trying to get a new tent from DPW. But somewhere else, somebody just fell off a ladder and injured themselves. We are not medical professionals, we cannot diagnose. Even if there is a bone sticking out of a leg and it's bleeding, we're not going to diagnose that as a broken leg. We could say, person fell and there is a bone sticking out of their leg, that much a general person can see. But I can't diagnose even a very obvious broken leg. I can diagnose there's blood. I can diagnose that somebody's breathing or not conscious. So say that happened. My tent situation is important, but getting medical to the broken leg is even more important. So I'm going to say break, and I'm going to have a pause. So I'm talking to DPW, and I'm talking to you, and then I say break. 5 or 10 seconds later, I start talking again, but that 5 or 10 seconds gives space for somebody with something more important to break in. So if they need to break in, they'll say break, 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 meaning I have something that's way more important that needs to happen. So break, break, break. Medical, medical, Freya. Go for medical, medical. I have a participant that fell off of a ladder and is bleeding at center camp. Then medical will likely respond, rolling medical to center camp for a participant that is bleeding and fell off of a ladder. Check, right? That's all that we have to do. And now the conversation about the tent can continue. Or you may have somebody that says, in that space, say, break with more information. Meaning, I'm talking to DPW, right? My tent's still broken. And now I break. Somebody says, break with more information. I have 3 of those carport poles that you need and you were trying to figure a solution out with. I will deliver those carport poles to Ranger HQ. Whatever it is. So that's what break with more information would be, and is a very useful thing. So the other thing to remember is there's things that we don't say. Some events actually have monitored radios. Some events don't. And you should always treat a radio call as if this is public information. You are on a bullhorn and speaking on the radio. Even switching to a private channel, you don't know who is listening, so assume everybody is listening. So in those worlds, we don't say any sort of profanity. We don't mention anything illegal. We would never, so if you have something and you just don't know how to say, I need a face-to-face. I don't know how to communicate this, or anything that's alarming. You need to get medical here, but you don't need to say something that's going to alarm anybody that might hear it and take it out of context. So just be really mindful of what you're saying and how you're saying it. The other things that we might want to say are open mic. So open mic, because remember, radios are a one-way radio. And so you give somebody a hug or you lay on your radio and now we hear you having a conversation about bacon. It's great. You're not using the radio properly. So you'll hear somebody, I tend to be one of those people, tell you open mic. Just say open mic. And that's just be aware that when somebody hits your radio button, we all can hear what's going on and nobody can transmit important information. Another thing we want to talk about is going direct. So that tent situation I was talking about earlier, that might be something that you want to say go direct. And so I'd say, you know what, let's go to channel 2. And then I would also say Freya to channel 2. So I'm letting everybody on the radio know that I am not monitoring channel 1 anymore. And then we go to channel 2. I get to channel 2. I'd be like, hey, Freya's on channel 2. DPW says DPW lead channel 2. Now we talk. And then when we both get back to channel 1, individually, I will say, Freya back on channel 1. So I'm just letting people know I'm back on that main channel so they know who's listening. We all do a radio check at the beginning. So that's another thing that we want to do is, so if you have a radio, you get on the radio and you say radio check. That means, does my radio work? Somebody will say yes. They might make a snarky comment. That is a radio. We only take credit cards. We don't take checks. I don't know. People say weird things. But they'll respond back to you that you have a radio. Keep in mind, if you are radioing and you're facing somebody else with a radio, it creates this terrible screechy noise that is horrible for everyone. So just kind of keep your volume down and face away from somebody else with a radio if you're going to be making a radio call. Otherwise, that feedback is horrendous. Another really big tip is to count. I like to count to 5 or so in these events. Sometimes it's 10, based on how important is my issue. So there's radio traffic. Radio traffic's obviously done. You heard the person say, they would conclude the conversation, and you want to be on the radio now. But maybe somebody else is also waiting. So how important is that thing that you're talking about? Back to somebody fell off a ladder. It's probably a 1. So that's done. You've already thought about what you're going to say. You push, you talk, you ask for your medical. Oh, there's bacon. Somebody's making soup and offering it to all volunteers. It's probably closer to a 5, Bacon is important. Soup is amazing. We love all of these things. However, in the world of bacon versus person that just fell off a ladder, that's kind of the 5. So just think about that there's other people probably waiting to transmit. And so unless it's really, think of how important it is and count to that number. 1 being super important, 5, maybe 10 being, no, it's not that important. I'll get to it. That's just good hygiene. So that way the important calls can get through and we can be really productive. And then the last thing I want to talk about is troubleshooting your radio. I guess before that, so I have a radio most of the time for a lot of the events that I have because I'm a department lead. I like to have the radio in my ear instead of on my shoulder. It depends at the event what works for the radios, but typically a standard headphone jack will fit into a lot of our microphones and our handsets, and then you can put that in your ear. So 1, you're having a conversation with somebody and they're not hearing all the radio traffic and getting distracted. 2, I can go into a loud dance area, I can still hear my radio. And so that might be something that you want. You can use, like I said, any standard headphones. You can buy special ones that you can get on Amazon for like $5 or $10. I usually just end up having regular headphones. Usually they were the ones from my cell phone that I ended up breaking the speaker on, but the microphone on, but the speaker still works, so I use those. So the last thing I was going to talk about was troubleshooting. If your radio doesn't turn on, check the battery, make sure it's properly installed. If it's chirping a lot, it means you have a low battery. Go get a new battery. Ideally, batteries are changed once a shift, between shift changes. I find a lot of these events, unless you're using the radio all the time, they can typically go 2 shifts, maybe 3 shifts, but, don't worry about batteries. Just change out your batteries frequently and often. Make sure you're on the right channel. Every once in a while you slip to the other channel. If you haven't heard radio traffic in, half an hour or so, double check that you're on the right channel. Double check that your volume didn't get turned all the way down. Make sure your accessories are properly connected to the radios. This is one of the reasons why I don't recommend finding out what the radio is and getting a custom-made earpiece for it, because that's where a lot of failure occurs. Whereas with the standard headphones, it's a very simple connection and you're having fewer failures there. You have the standard technology answer of turn it off, turn it back on. And you could also see if moving a little bit helps. Typically at the events that we're doing, the land is small enough. We don't have the problem with it doesn't work in specific areas, but go ahead and try that. And if you're near a metal structure, like scaffolding, something very, very large, there may be some level of interference. Try standing away from that. Otherwise, get on the radio, call the radio lead, or call your department lead, depending on who you are and what your radio checkout status is, and then just get a new radio, and we'll figure it out later. So those are kind of all the basic things. So again, remember, we only say things on the radio that we need to say. This isn't a toy. This isn't something for you to use like you're using a cell phone for your friend. Using it for operational things only. When we make the call, we say the other person's handle twice, followed by our own. So Sherpa, Sherpa, Freya. Dirty D, Freya. Medical, medical rangers. Any of these, that's what we want to do. All-com means if you're hearing all-com and you have a radio, please listen up. And then the general standard of how we do this is we think, we know what we're going to say. We listen to the radio, make sure nobody's talking. We push the button, maybe count 1 or 2 seconds to get the connection. We speak very succinctly, then we release the button. If you're holding on the button, nobody else can talk, and so release the button and listen and have the conversation. If you're having a long monologue, break, so that somebody can come in with break if they have something more important. So thank you guys so much for listening to this. Feel free to share it with your teams, and I look forward to having a great event with you guys. Have a great day. Bye-bye.